Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be focusing on something that's super relevant for all you UPSC mains folks out there, tribunal reforms in India. And guess what? It's a hot topic that could easily pop up on your prelims radar too.
It really could.
We're going to be dissecting a recent article from the Hindustan Times, Tribunal Reforms Act, Supreme Court Review and Key Provisions. We'll break down why it matters, what the key takeaways are, and, of course, how this all ties into your exam prep. And hey, while you're at it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more daily UPSC insights. Got any questions? Hit us up in the comments below. We love hearing from you guys.
Absolutely. So jumping right in, what's really interesting is that we've got the Supreme Court currently reviewing this Tribunal Reforms Act of 2021, and it's causing quite a stir.
It's definitely making headlines. Okay, so tribunals. For those of us who might need a little refresher, what exactly are they? And why should a UPSC aspirant care?
Good question. You can think of tribunals as kind of like specialized courts, They handle specific types of disputes, and they're designed to operate outside the regular court system.
So they're like separate from the usual courts. Why is that?
Exactly. It helps to streamline things. So we're talking about disputes related to things like taxes, environmental issues, even cybercrime. It takes a huge burden off our already super busy courts. And it allows for faster resolutions, especially when you have experts in those specific fields handling the cases.
Right. It's like calling in specialists when you need a specific problem solved. Makes sense. So for our UPSC folks, why are tribunals so important? Why should they care?
Well, think about it. They pop up in the news all the time. They're often linked to major current events, policy changes, things like that. This whole Supreme Court review of the Tribunal Reforms Act. Prime example.
It's a pretty big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
And for you guys prepping for the UPSC, understanding this act, all its little details and all the drama surrounding it, that's gold for crafting those top-notch answers, both in mains and prelims.
I can definitely see that. So let's dig into this act a bit. Why was it introduced in the first place? What problem was it trying to solve? Give us that backstory.
Okay, so picture this. The Tribunal Reforms Act of 2021, it came about because there were a lot of concerns about how tribunals were actually functioning, and also their accountability.
There were issues with how they were working, basically.
Yeah, like were they really independent? Were they efficient? All those questions were swirling around. And then, boom, we have the Madras Bar Association case in 2021. Remember that one?
Vaguely rings a bell. Remind me.
Okay, so this case, it basically threw some serious shade on the independence and efficiency of tribunals. The Supreme Court was like, hold up, we need some serious changes here. And the 2021 Act, that's the government's response to all those concerns. They're trying to streamline the system, fix the loopholes, and address all the points the Supreme Court raised.
Okay, so it's like they saw the system wasn't quite working as intended, and this act is their attempt to fix it. Like a toolbox for tribunal reform.
Exactly. A toolbox full of new rules and regulations.
So what are some of the big tools in this toolbox? The major provisions, the things that really change the game.
Okay, so one of the biggest changes, like a huge shift, is that they're abolishing certain tribunals altogether.
Yeah.
Gone. And they're transferring their functions to other existing bodies, like the high courts.
Whoa. So some tribunals are just getting the boot. Why is that? Is it about efficiency?
It is. It's all about consolidating, streamlining, getting rid of redundancy and making everything more efficient.
So fewer tribunals, but hopefully better ones, right? What about the ones that are sticking around? How does this act impact them? What changes are they facing?
Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. They're introducing this new thing called the Search-Cum-Selection Committee. This committee is going to be the big cheese when it comes to recommending appointments for tribunal members and chairpersons.
So they have the power to say who gets to be on a tribunal.
Exactly.
I bet there are some specific details about this committee that our UPSC folks should know.
Right. Oh, you bet. You need to know this stuff inside and out. The composition of this committee, it's different for central and state tribunals. Different players, different levels of involvement from the judiciary and the executive. That's the kind of detail that can make or break your UPSC answer.
Ooh, yeah, I can totally see a mains question about that. Analyze the composition of the Search-Cum-Selection Committee and its implications for tribunal independence, something like that.
Bingo. And then on top of all that, we have the whole shebang about tenure, age limits, and the process for removing tribunal members. Lots of rules and regulations. The Act sets a 4-year term for both chairpersons and members, with minimum and maximum age limits. And of course, they've outlined how to remove members if needed, which involves the central government and that Search-Cum-Selection Committee again.
So the Act's basically laying down the law on who gets in, how long they stay, and how they can be kicked out. It sounds like it's all about structure, clarity, and accountability.
It does seem that way, right?
On the surface, at least, it sounds like a positive step. But are things really that simple?
Well, that's where it gets a bit more complicated. The Act is great in theory, but the reality on the ground is often a different story. There are real-world challenges that tribunals in India are facing, and they're not going away overnight.
So the Act might look good on paper, but it doesn't magically solve everything.
Yeah.
There's more to it.
Much more. Tribunals are still grappling with a whole bunch of hurdles that impact how effective they really are.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into those challenges then. What are we talking about here?
Let's do it. Welcome back, everyone.
All right, so we've laid out the big picture stuff, the main issues.
Right, the overview.
Now let's get down to brass tacks.
Sure.
Can we bring this down to earth with some real-world examples, make these concepts a bit more tangible, especially for our UPSC folks who are prepping for those exams?
Absolutely. Because, it's one thing to know the theory, but it's a whole other ballgame to see how it actually plays out in real life, right? That's what's going to help you nail those UPSC answers.
For sure. So do you have any case studies or examples that come to mind, something that really brings these challenges to life?
Oh, tons. Let's start with the National Green Tribunal, the NGT.
The NGT, the environmental watchdog.
Exactly.
I remember we touched upon their infrastructure woes earlier.
They did.
Could you unpack that a bit more? How do those limitations actually prevent them from doing their job properly?
Yeah.
From actually delivering justice?
Absolutely. Okay, so the NGT, right. Their whole purpose is to provide these quick and efficient resolutions for environmental disputes. Noble goal, right?
Absolutely.
But here's the catch. Their purpose is often hampered by a lack of resources.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine you get a UPSC question asking you to analyze the NGT's effectiveness. Could you argue that their lack of infrastructure directly impacts their ability to deliver environmental justice?
I see what you're saying. So if the NGT doesn't have proper courtrooms, up-to-date digital systems, even just basic tech support,
Right.
it's going to be really hard for them to handle all those cases effectively.
Exactly. And we're talking about a country like India where environmental issues are everywhere and super complex.
Huge problem.
It is. Think about it. Without proper digital systems, how are they supposed to manage all that data? Pollution readings, scientific reports, all those impact assessments. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's a ton of information to process.
It is. And if they can't process it efficiently, it leads to delays, errors, and it can even hinder their ability to make those well-informed decisions.
Makes sense. So it's not enough to just have a tribunal in place. You have to give them the tools and resources to actually do their job.
That's the key.
It's like having a surgeon who's brilliant, but they don't have any surgical instruments, right? What's the point?
Exactly. You need the tools to get the job done.
So we've got the NGT as a prime example. Any other cases you want to highlight? Other tribunals that are struggling with these kinds of challenges?
Let's switch gears and look at the NCLT and NCLA.
Okay. Remind me what those are again.
Those are the tribunals handling insolvency cases under the IBC.
The IBC?
Yeah.
The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code?
That's the one.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
It's a hot topic in the business world for sure.
Oh, absolutely. It was supposed to revolutionize how we deal with corporate insolvency in India. A total game changer.
So what's the issue then? What are the NCLT and NCLAD struggling with?
Well, they've been hit with this massive wave of cases, and on top of that, they've got all these procedural hurdles that are causing major delays.
So the IBC was designed to speed things up, but it sounds like the tribunals are actually slowing things down.
Sadly, yeah. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? A law meant to expedite resolutions is itself getting bogged down by delays.
It is. Can you give me an example? Like, how would this play out in a UPSC question?
Let's say you get a question analyzing the effectiveness of the IBC. Could you argue that the procedural delays within the NCLT and NCLA actually hinder the IBC's intended purpose?
I think I could, yeah. It defeats the whole point.
Exactly.
So what exactly are these procedural hurdles that are tripping up the NCLT and NCLT?
Oh, it's a whole bunch of things, but one major culprit is adjournments.
Adjournments?
Yeah, those postponements of hearings.
Ah, I see.
They can be legit sometimes, if there's a genuine reason.
Sure.
But they're often misused, and that just stretches out the cases way longer than they need to be.
It's like hitting the pause button on a movie over and over again.
Exactly. The story's there, but it's taking forever to unfold.
And it's not just adjournments, right? What else is going on?
Oh, there's more. Missed deadlines are a big one. And then there's the whole issue of weak enforcement of orders.
So if the tribunals make a ruling, it's not always followed.
Not always, no. And that creates a backlog, it puts more pressure on the tribunals, and ultimately, it just undermines the whole process.
It's like a domino effect. One delay leads to another, and the whole system gets jammed up.
It really is. It's a chain reaction.
Okay, so we've got these concrete examples playing out in the NGT, NCLT, and NCLAT.
Real world stuff.
Showing us that there's a gap between what the Act aims to do and what's actually happening.
But what about the big leagues? What's going on at the Supreme Court level? What arguments are they hearing about all this?
Oh, it's a constitutional showdown up there.
Sounds intense.
It is. The Supreme Court is basically trying to figure out if this act actually aligns with the Constitution.
Huge question.
It is. And the arguments they're hearing, they all revolve around those key issues we talked about: appointments, tenure, and the overall autonomy of tribunals.
So it's a high-stakes legal battle with the fate of tribunals hanging in the balance.
Exactly. It's a big deal.
So break it down for me, for our UPSC preppers out there. What are the main points of contention? What are the different sides arguing about?
Okay, so one of the biggest arguments is about that search cum selection committee we talked about earlier.
The one that decides who gets appointed to tribunals.
Yep. Some people are saying that giving the executive branch too much power in that committee could jeopardize the independence of tribunals.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
They don't want the government to have too much control over who gets to be a judge, basically.
Exactly. They're worried about political influence. And wouldn't that go against the separation of powers?
Exactly. It's a fundamental principle of our democracy.
So it's this classic UPSC conundrum. How do you balance efficiency with safeguards against corruption and undue influence?
It's the million-dollar question.
So that's one big argument.
Wow.
What else is being debated?
Okay, another key point of contention is the tenure of tribunal members.
The 4-year term.
Yep. Some people argue that 4 years just isn't long enough.
Not enough time to get things done.
Not really. It's more about expertise. They say 4 years isn't enough time for members to really become experts in their fields.
It's like expecting a chef to master French cuisine in a few months, and then switching them over to Italian before they've even perfected their soufflé.
That's a great analogy.
So continuity and expertise are super important for any judicial body.
Tribunals are no different. And having a short tenure could lead to inconsistency. You lose that institutional memory.
Which could ultimately impact the quality of judgments.
And that's a big problem.
It could undermine the whole system. So we've got concerns about appointments and tenure.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other arguments being thrown around in this legal tug-of-war?
Oh, there's one more. It's a big one. The overall autonomy of tribunals.
Their independence.
Right. Some folks are arguing that the 2021 Act gives the government way too much power to dissolve or restructure tribunals.
So they could just get rid of a tribunal if they don't like its rulings.
It's a possibility. And that raises some serious red flags.
I can see why. It could be used to silence dissenting voices, to manipulate the system.
Exactly. It's all about ensuring that tribunals can actually function independently without being pawns in a political game.
Right. It's about finding that balance between government oversight and making sure that tribunals can operate without fear or favor.
That's the sweet spot.
So this whole legal battle really gets to the heart of our judicial system, doesn't it? It's a reminder that justice is something we're always striving for.
It's an ongoing process.
We're constantly adapting, refining, trying to uphold those fundamental principles.
And for UPSC aspirants, this case is a goldmine. It's a window into how our legal system works.
The complexities, the nuances,
The checks and balances.
how the different branches of government interact.
It's all there.
And for our listeners out there prepping for those UPSC exams, I cannot emphasize enough how crucial it is to understand these nuances.
It's not just about knowing the facts.
It's about being able to analyze, to critique, to form your own informed opinions.
To connect the dots.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty details of the Tribunal Reforms Act to the real-world challenges and the high-stakes legal arguments.
We've gone deep.
But our deep dive isn't over yet.
Not quite.
In the final part, we're going to explore some potential solutions to these challenges.
We're going to talk about how to fix the system, how to make tribunals work better.
And we'll discuss how understanding these solutions can help our UPSC aspirants ace their exams.
Because that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. All right, welcome back to the final stretch of our deep dive on tribunal reforms. We've talked about the problems, the legal battles, and now it's solution time. How do we make tribunals more efficient, effective, actually deliver on their promise of timely justice? And of course, how does knowing all this help our UPSC folks crush those exams?
So the silver lining here is that a lot of the solutions actually lie in strengthening those core areas we've already discussed.
Okay, I like it. We're building on what we've already learned.
Exactly. Think of it as a multi-pronged approach. We tackle manpower, infrastructure, procedures, and autonomy all at once.
I'm all about actionable steps, especially when it comes to UPSC prep. So give me those concrete solutions, the things we can actually do to turn the system around.
All right, step one, let's prioritize appointments. We need a process for selecting tribunal members that's streamlined, transparent, and minimizes any chances of, shady dealings. We want qualified, experienced people, period. Remember all those concerns about the search cum selection committee, how it's composed, who has the power? Well, addressing those concerns is huge, both for fixing the system and for your UPSC answers. You could definitely get a question about that.
So getting the right people in those seats is priority number one. But it's not just about filling positions, is it? It's about making sure those individuals are set up for success. Like, proper training is essential, right?
Absolutely. Think of it like this. You've got these newly appointed members. They need a crash course on all the laws, procedures, the ins and outs of how their specific tribunal works. Give them the tools and knowledge to navigate this complex world and make sound judgments. It's a no-brainer. And for our UPSC folks, imagine a question asking you to propose reforms. How would you improve efficiency? Boom, specialized training programs.
It's like equipping them with a map and a compass before setting them off into the legal wilderness, right? So we've got appointments, training. What about those, let's be honest, sometimes crumbling courtrooms and those outdated systems? How do we bring tribunal infrastructure into the 21st century?
This is where tech comes in. Seriously, embracing technology is going to be a total game changer. We need electronic case management systems, digitized records, and seamless integration with e-courts. Think about it. Case files accessible online, hearings conducted remotely, judgments delivered electronically. The efficiency, the accessibility, it's huge.
It's like trading in a horse and buggy for a high-speed train. Talk about a leap forward. Can you give me some specific examples of how tech could actually improve things, especially keeping in mind those UPSC answers?
Okay, picture the NGT, right? They're dealing with environmental disputes. Imagine they have this super-powered digital platform that pulls in real-time pollution data from monitoring stations and feeds it directly into their case management system. Data-driven decisions, boom. Or take the NCLT and NCLAT. They're drowning in insolvency cases. Now imagine they're using AI to analyze all that data, predict bottlenecks, and optimize scheduling. Delays? What delays?
Okay, I'm convinced. It's not just about replacing paper with computers. It's about using tech to make everything smoother, smarter. We've talked tech upgrades, training, appointments. What about those pesky procedural roadblocks that always seem to clog up the system? How do we clear the path, so to speak?
It's all about streamlining. We need stricter rules on adjournments, maybe even some penalties for unnecessary delays. Hit them where it hurts their wallets. And let's not forget about alternative dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration. Sometimes you don't need a full-blown trial. A mediated settlement can be way faster, cheaper, and less adversarial.
It's like having multiple paths to justice, recognizing that not every case needs the same approach. Now, what about the unsung heroes, the folks behind the scenes, the administrative staff? How do we empower them?
Oh, they're crucial. Training, resources, recognition, they need it all. A well-oiled machine needs all its parts working properly. You could even get a UPSC question about this. Analyze the factors contributing to tribunal efficiency. And boom, you talk about the importance of a well-trained, well-supported administrative staff.
It's a team effort, for sure. Now, let's tackle that tricky balance between autonomy and accountability. How do we make sure tribunals are empowered to do their job without becoming these, rogue entities answerable to no one?
Right, that's the tightrope walk. Tribunals need a certain degree of autonomy, that freedom to make decisions without someone breathing down their neck. That means secure funding, appointments based on merit, protection from interference. But autonomy without accountability can lead to, well, let's just say, not so great things.
It can't be a free-for-all. What kind of oversight is needed to keep things transparent and prevent any abuse of power?
Think parliamentary oversight, independent audits, clear ways to address complaints against tribunal members. Transparency is key. And hey, guess what? Potential UPSC question. Evaluate the measures taken to ensure tribunal accountability. You could talk about all these oversight mechanisms, how well they work, the whole 9 yards.
It's all about striking that balance. Tough, but essential. And for our UPSC warriors, this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
You got to understand these nuances. It's not just about memorizing laws. It's about how they work, their strengths and weaknesses, proposing solutions.
It's about thinking critically,
Hmm.
analyzing complex situations, and then articulating all of that effectively. And this whole tribunal reform saga, it's the perfect example of how seemingly boring legal stuff can have real-world consequences.
And become the basis for some seriously challenging UPSC questions. Well, folks, that brings our deep dive on tribunal reforms to a close. We've explored the challenges, the battles, the potential solutions. For all you dedicated UPSC aspirants, I hope this episode has given you the knowledge and the ammo you need to conquer those exam questions. Remember, it's all about connecting the dots, analyzing those different viewpoints, and forming your own informed opinions.
And hey, if you want to dive deeper, check out that Hindustan Times article that got this whole conversation started. The link's down in the description.
And as always, we love hearing from you guys. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts, your questions, any burning UPSC topics you'd like us to tackle. All down in the comments below. Keep those brains buzzing, and we'll see you in our next deep dive.